Caggiato Township outskirts, early morning. A cry broke through the quiet just after the first carts had rolled across the gravel. It came sharp and high from the narrow runoff ditch that cut beside the old maize stall, the kind of sound that made the few walking past pause but not turn. Only one boy, no older than 10, crossed to the edge. His slippers skidded on loose stones. He stood looking down. The sound came again, thinner now. In the muddy dark beneath the road lip, where water trickled from last night's rain, a small form shifted. A puppy, curled tight against the concrete wall, eyes wide, coat wet and matted with grit. She tried to lift her head again, but it dropped almost instantly. Her legs twitched once and gave out beneath her. The cry that followed didn't rise. It caught in her throat, ending in a tremble. She had likely been there for hours. The ditch stayed cold long after sunrise. A bit of plastic clung to her flank. Her ribs rose too sharply for her size. Flies had already found the corners of her eyes. Still, she hadn't stopped calling, even if the voice broke, even if it made her weaker. The boy didn't climb down. He ran toward the fruit vendor at the corner, a woman who knew where the rangers parked on Sundays. One call to the shelter brought a name they all knew: Elias. He arrived 15 minutes later in the same green vehicle the children recognized from schoolyard talks. He didn't ask for the story. He didn't waste time looking around. He just stepped quietly to the culvert's edge, knelt down, and leaned forward without a word. The puppy blinked once at the movement. She didn't try to stand. One paw stretched sideways into the mud. Her chest moved, shallow, slow, but moving. Her tail lay motionless. She didn't bark, didn't growl. There was no sound now at all, just breathing. Elias eased himself into the ditch without noise. His boots slipped slightly but held. He crouched beside her, waiting first, then reached with one hand. She flinched. A tiny jerk, more instinct than defense. Her body couldn't fight. She lay still again. He slid a cloth under her belly, careful not to bend the legs. As he lifted, her head lolled. One ear folded over. Her eyes stayed open. She weighed almost nothing. Mud clung to her fur, darkening the spots along her side. Elias pressed her gently against his chest and stepped back up the embankment. The boy was still there. So was the vendor. A quiet passed between them. No one cheered. No one clapped. Just the low rustle of sacks shifting in the morning wind. If she didn't drink soon, her kidneys might fail. If she couldn't keep warmth, her heart might stop. If they'd come an hour later, she wouldn't have cried at all. Elias laid her on a folded towel in the back seat. He placed a tin bowl beside her, half filled with water. She didn't move toward it, but her breath still came. Slow, fragile, present. The culvert behind them stayed silent now. Nothing else moved in the ditch. The boy took one more glance before walking away. Elias sat behind the wheel. The tires rolled slowly over the gravel as the dust rose in a low cloud behind them, then settled. The vehicle came to a stop just beyond the maize stall, dust curling against the tires as Elias stepped out with the folded towel still damp from where the puppy had laid. He didn't rush. The roadside was quiet now, the fruit vendor gone back to sorting baskets of guavas and cassava beneath the patched tarp. Elias opened the back door and knelt beside the pup, whose body remained curled inward, legs tucked as if still bracing against cold. Her breathing had grown quieter in the ride, more space now between each rise of her ribs. He touched 2 fingers lightly to her chest. The beat was there, not steady, not strong, but there, a thread holding. The risk had not passed. Puppies this young and this weak could fade without warning. If she slipped into stillness, it would be difficult to bring her back. Her gums were pale, her nose dry, but her eyes opened once as he adjusted the towel beneath her side. They didn't focus, just fluttered, then closed again. He whispered low, just enough for her to hear, "You're still here." Elias moved with practiced hands. He reached for the small water bottle and poured carefully into the edge of the tin bowl beside her head. One drop splashed near her paw. She didn't move, but when he dipped a corner of gauze into the water and pressed it gently to her tongue, she responded with a weak flick. Not a lick, just contact. It was enough. She wasn't shaking anymore, but that wasn't comfort. It was depletion. Even her tail, which had shifted during the drive, now lay limp. Elias folded the blanket tighter around her. Every step from here would have to be slow. Too much noise, too much movement, could send her body into shock. Her system wasn't ready for heat or hydration in large amounts. Just seconds at a time. Just drops. He sat beside her for several minutes. His hand rested on her side without pressure, counting each breath. 8 seconds. 12. Then another rise. She was still present. Barely, but present. If she lost warmth now, she'd stop. If she couldn't absorb the water in small intervals, her kidneys would begin to fail. Every moment carried its own quiet threshold. When she stirred again, a shift of one paw, a small sound deep in her throat, Elias moved quickly but gently. He unzipped the side pocket of the bag, pulled out the thermal pack, cracked it, and slipped it beneath the blanket near her spine. Her skin twitched once at the heat. That twitch was the first full-body response she'd shown. A market boy paused nearby with a bundle of sugar cane. He said nothing but watched as Elias placed one hand gently over the blanket. The ranger didn't turn. His focus remained steady, expression calm, even as the pup moaned again. Softer now, more instinct than call. Her mouth parted slightly, just enough for another drop of water. If she lived through the next 3 hours, she might survive the night. But there were still risks. Dehydration, organ stress, shock response, secondary infection. No wound visible, but exposure did its own kind of damage. Her muscles were rigid from cold, and her pads were cracked from the rough culvert floor. Her age worked in her favor. Her weight did not. As the heat pack settled and the sun rose further, the flies thinned. The air carried warmth now, and Elias adjusted the towel once more to shield her eyes. For the first time, her head turned slightly toward the sound of his breath. He said nothing more, just sat beside her, one palm resting against her side, steady as the rising wind. The gauze had dried at the edge. Elias dipped it again in the water, held it just above the puppy's mouth, and waited. Her body remained still except for the shallow pull of her ribs. One drop touched her tongue, and this time her mouth opened a fraction wider. Not enough to drink. Just a soft effort, a trace of movement, but it was different. He lowered the tin bowl beside her jaw, careful not to spill. The sound of water settling echoed faintly against the metal. Her eyes stayed closed. Then her nose shifted. Just once. A slow, hesitant nudge forward. Her whiskers brushed the edge of the bowl. No sound followed, no licking, but she didn't pull away. Her nostrils flared, then stilled. She was aware, present enough to smell the tin. That alone was enough to try again. Elias took the cloth from beneath her shoulder and folded it twice. He slid it behind her head to lift her angle slightly. The motion made her body tighten. Her front paw jerked, then relaxed again. When he guided the wet gauze to her lips this time, she gave a weak suckle. Not consistent, not full, but water touched her throat. She swallowed once, then fell still. Her energy had run out. What came next had to be done without pushing her limits. If her temperature dropped again, her organs would slow. If she took in too much water at once, she could aspirate and drown. Time was measured not in minutes, but in signs. A paw lifting, an eye fluttering, the jaw moving against his hand. Elias watched for each. He reached into the rear seat and pulled out the old gray blanket used for injured cats. It still held the smell of the shelter's quiet room, clay dust, and disinfectant. She didn't resist as he placed it over her back. The weight of it helped. Her chest moved more rhythmically beneath the cloth. a sign of stabilization, though not safety. With the blanket tucked beneath her sides, Elias slid both hands under her body, one at the neck, one at the hips. She was lighter than he remembered from earlier. Wet fur always gave a false sense of weight. Now that it was drying, the truth showed more clearly. She had no fat reserves, no energy stored. He whispered once as he lifted her, voice steady. Almost there. Her body folded into itself as he cradled her close. Her hind leg twitched. Not from pain, but reflex. She didn't whimper, she didn't blink, but she stayed warm. The heat pack beneath the blanket held against his arm. He walked back to the vehicle slowly. The air had shifted slightly, the warmth of the late morning pressing down across the gravel lot. A few children stood nearby, watching from behind the maize sacks. No one spoke. Inside the car, Elias laid her on a towel layered twice across the back seat. The bowl stayed beside her head, and the blanket wrapped snug up to her ears. Her front paw had curled inward again, a natural reflex in young dogs when comfort returns briefly to the joints. If she rested for the next hour without dipping below alert, her circulation would hold. If her breathing stayed clear, she might take more water before evening. But nothing was certain. The most dangerous point wasn't over. It had simply shifted. He closed the door with care. In the side mirror, the road stretched bare past the fruit stalls. The puppy didn't move, but the cloth at her side fluttered once with her breath. A single, soft rise. Nothing more. The engine had just turned when Elias heard it. Not a bark, not even a whimper, but the wet scrape of something shifting against concrete. He froze, hand still resting on the gear lever, and listened again. The sound came once more, low and strained, trailing off into silence. It came from the ditch, not from the roadside or trees, from the exact culvert where the first pup had been found. He stepped out without closing the door. The breeze had dropped, leaving the air heavy and still. Gravel shifted underfoot as he walked back toward the drainage mouth. The fruit vendor had gone. The boys were gone. The world felt narrowed to this one stretch of roadside and the noise that had come from it. Elias crouched again at the rim, peering into the shadows. The trickle of water from the previous night's rain was thinner now. On the far side, caught against the crumbled concrete lip beneath a flattened sack, lay a second form. It didn't move, smaller than the first, curled in the same protective shape, head tucked, paws drawn in. He waited. No sound came again. He slid down into the ditch, slower this time, careful not to disturb the runoff. The mud gave slightly beneath his boots. He reached across with the flashlight, beam catching a glint of fur just beneath the folds of plastic. The pup didn't react. No flinch, no moan. He moved closer, now kneeling, and placed 2 fingers gently against the flank. For 3 seconds, there was nothing. On the 4th, a faint rise. A breath. The pup was alive, but barely. Its body was soaked through, lighter than the first, and colder. The hind legs had stiffened slightly and its neck didn't respond to touch. A faint wheeze came from the mouth as Elias shifted the sack off. He spoke once, low and firm. "Stay with me." Time was narrower now. This pup was closer to shutting down. No strength left to cry, only the instinct to stay small, to hold warmth that wasn't there. The risk was immediate. Hypothermia, fluid in the lungs, complete collapse. If he moved too fast, the heart might not keep rhythm. If he waited too long, it would stop. He unwrapped the side of the blanket that had covered the first pup and tucked it beneath this one, folding the corners in tight, sealing the damp out. Then he pressed the pup close to his chest, letting body heat replace the air. The small head lolled backward, but there was no resistance. Just breath. Slow, wet, and shallow. The drive to the shelter would take 5 minutes. That was all he had. 5 minutes to warm the core, to keep the airways clear. He carried the second pup up the embankment and slid into the driver's seat without speaking. The first lay still under the blanket, head turned slightly now toward the noise. Elias glanced once in the mirror, then pulled away. Behind him, the culvert was silent again. The water continued its quiet movement, curling past the plastic and old branches as if nothing had been there at all. The second pup stayed silent in his arms. Her breath was thinner than air, a soft draw that came every few seconds, then paused too long before the next. Elias felt it against his chest. Barely there, but enough. He didn't speak. He kept one hand curved beneath her spine, the other steadying the front as he drove across the last stretch of road, wheels brushing the shoulder's edge where the dust turned paler. The shelter wasn't far, but time moved differently when life hung so close to stillness. Inside the quiet room, the bulb over the recovery shelf was already warming. He'd switched it on the moment he returned earlier with the first pup. Now it cast a low yellow glow across the folded towels that lined the bench. Elias laid the new one down first, closer to the heat. Her legs remained tucked, not from comfort, but from cold. He pressed 2 fingers gently under her jaw. There was no movement at first, then a faint flutter, irregular, light, but present. He folded the blanket tighter, rolled another dry towel and wedged it near her flank for support. Her mouth remained half open, tongue dry. No sound came. But the pulse remained under his fingertips. If she kept it another hour, her circulation might stabilize. If she didn't, it would slow until it stopped. Beside her, the first pup stirred. She had shifted her head slightly toward the warmth and now lay with one paw extended past the edge of the towel. Her nose twitched at the scent of the second. There was no energy left for recognition, but their nearness made a difference. Elias adjusted the blanket over her shoulder and slid a folded cloth beneath both bodies to keep their spines elevated from the chill of the shelf. He dribbled a line of water between the smaller one's lips. It beaded and sat there. No swallow. Then, barely visible, the tongue lifted. Just once. That small gesture was enough to continue. He soaked the gauze again and dabbed it gently against the inside of her cheek. No cough, no pull, just breath. He moved slowly, returning to the far shelf to bring another thermal pack. He tucked it beneath their legs where it wouldn't touch skin directly. The warmth rose gently. If their bodies accepted it, if their cores didn't resist, they might survive the night. But it would take hours. And any drop in temperature, any shock from fluids too fast, could change that. He sat down beside the bench, knees bent, back against the doorframe. His hand stayed on the edge of the towel, fingers brushing the edge of a paw. The light above them flickered once as power shifted from the generator line. Then steadied. Both pups remained still, but both breathed. Behind the shelter wall, wind pressed through the grass that ran along the fencing line. It moved in waves, not loud, not fast, just steady. The sun had dipped low behind the edge of the township hills, casting a rust-colored light across the back fence of the shelter. The air had cooled just enough for the flies to vanish and the silence to stretch long between wind gusts. Inside the quiet room, both pups still lay tucked beneath the same thermal-warmed blanket. Their breathing had steadied into soft rhythm, though neither had yet lifted their heads. Elias remained close, checking vitals every 20 minutes, adjusting the cloths, replacing the water in the shallow saucer. Outside, gravel shifted near the fence line. Not loud, not fast, just the soft scrape of tired feet against dry soil. Elias didn't move. He listened, eyes still fixed on the smaller pup's side. The sound came again, closer now, deliberate. Then nothing. Through the far window pane, a shape paused in shadow. It stood just beyond the reach of the floodlight, ribs visible beneath stretched skin, one front paw slightly raised. The dog didn't bark. She didn't whine. She stood still for a full minute, then stepped forward and lowered herself slowly to the ground. Her ears stayed pressed back. Her body wasn't tense, but it wasn't relaxed either. She watched the light in the quiet room, not blinking, not turning away. Her nose lifted once to catch a scent. The scent of milk, of old cloth, of pups too young to be alone. Her coat was patchy in places, dust matted into her back haunches. One hip curved in more than the other, as if she'd lost weight too quickly. Her teats were visible, dry but distended. Elias rose without sound and stepped closer to the window. The dog didn't move. She lay with her chin down now, head angled just enough to keep her eyes fixed through the glass. Behind her, a trail of shallow paw marks curved in from the slope. No others followed. She had come alone. If she'd fed recently, there'd be more strength in her frame. If she hadn't birthed those pups, her body wouldn't carry the hollow sag along her belly. Her return now, after so many hours, carried risk. For her and for the pups. But it also brought a question Elias couldn't answer yet. Had she chosen to leave them, or had she lost them? The pups inside didn't stir. One moaned faintly in sleep, a breath that caught on the exhale. The dog outside lifted her head slightly. Her ears shifted, not forward, not alert, but listening. She let out one low sound, too soft to be called a whine, more vibration than voice. She didn't rise. She didn't press against the fence. She only watched. Elias opened the side door and stepped out onto the gravel. He didn't approach her. He crouched beside the post and stayed still. The dog flicked her ear toward him but didn't lift her eyes. Her focus remained fixed on the window, on the warmth inside, on something she hadn't seen but could still sense. Her tail remained down. Her paws stayed crossed. There was no urgency in her posture, just presence. The wind picked up again across the field, bending the long stalks of wild maize just beyond the property line. The last bit of light caught her shoulder as she blinked once, slowly. Then she lay her head back down in the dust. Her eyes never left the window. By morning, the shelter grounds were quiet again. The light above the eastern field crept slowly over the fence slats, laying pale shapes across the dust and turning the long grass gold. The female dog had not moved from her place beside the window. Her body curled in the same position, ribs lifting in shallow rhythm, one paw tucked beneath her chest. Elias had stepped out twice in the night to check on her. Each time she had lifted her head briefly, then returned her gaze to the window. She made no attempt to cross, climb, or cry. She only waited. Inside, the pups had held their warmth. The smaller one's breathing remained uneven but stronger now, no longer catching in her throat. The other had begun to shift more often in sleep. Small adjustments, a paw stretching outward, a twitch in the flank. Both remained under the same towel, still nestled close. They had made it through the most fragile hours, but they were not stable yet. Without milk, without proper transfer of antibodies, infection could still set in. Weight loss could return within a day. Rehydration alone was not enough. Elias stood at the edge of the fence and watched the dog's eyes track him as he approached. She didn't lift her body, but when he unlocked the side gate, she rose slowly, each limb unfolding with care. She walked forward one step at a time, ears slightly tilted back, tail lowered but not tucked. He didn't reach for her. He stepped aside, leaving the path open toward the rear building. She paused just short of the threshold, her nails pressing into the floor tile as she crossed into the shelter corridor. Her eyes scanned the air more than the ground, moving from light to light, from doorway to sound. Then a soft whimper came from the quiet room. Her head lifted sharply. Her body leaned. Elias opened the door and stepped back. The scent hit her first, the unmistakable mix of milk, old blood, and pup skin. She let out one trembling exhale, not a bark, not even a moan, just a sound deep from her ribs, nearly inaudible. She stepped forward. The recovery crate had been left open on one side, its gate secured loosely to allow ventilation. The mother approached slowly, lowering her head just beneath the crate's lip. She didn't cry. She sniffed once, then again, tracing the towel's edge until her nose stopped at the small bundle of fur pressed near the heat pack. The smaller pup stirred faintly. Not fully awake, not able to see. But the movement was there. A tiny nudge of the nose, a slide of the head forward. Her muzzle remained perfectly still. Then she extended her paw, slow, careful, and rested it gently just inside the crate edge. The pup shifted again and nuzzled against it, folding slightly into her touch. If she stepped too fast, they could reject her scent. If she pushed into the crate, they could panic. But none of that happened. Her breathing deepened. The other pup, still half asleep, turned its head toward the warmth and made a sound like a sigh. Elias stayed in the corner of the room, hands folded, saying nothing. The mother lowered herself to the floor beside the crate, not forcing closeness, just remaining there. One ear flicked. Her eyes didn't close. A bird moved in the rafters above the shelter. Dust drifted lazily in the beam of light that passed across the floor, and for the first time, the room held no fear, only stillness and the faint sound of 3 slow breaths moving together. The mornings had grown warmer. The wind carried less chill now, just a soft dryness that rolled across the plains and pressed through the fence slats of the shelter. Inside, the quiet room smelled of old towels and gentle milk. The pups no longer slept, curled and silent. They shifted now between naps, nuzzled into their mother's side, and sometimes blinked slowly when light fell across their eyes. The smaller one had taken longer to stabilize, but she had gained weight in steady grams, each breath smoother than the last. The mother had remained quiet through it all. She did not leave the corner where the pups rested. Even when food was placed near her crate, she would not eat until both bodies beside her had settled fully. She drank in slow intervals. Her ribs no longer pressed so sharply, though her gait still favored one back leg. She did not bark. She did not complain. She was not afraid, but she had never allowed herself comfort. Elias observed without pressing. Each morning, he wiped down the recovery bench, refreshed the thermal packs though they were no longer needed, and checked for signs of infection. There were none. The pups had begun to tug gently at the blanket corners, their teeth barely formed, their movements clumsy but sure. They could stand now, if only for a moment. They responded to light, to temperature, to the scent of their mother's paw as it hovered near their heads. A week after the rescue, Elias stood at the edge of the shelter gate as the sun rose higher than usual. He had unlatched the main gate before breakfast, not as a decision, but as an offering. The wind moved through the open space, lifting small threads of straw from the earth. The mother approached the gate mid-morning. She stopped once, turned to check the pups behind her, then walked forward. They followed. First one, then the other. Their steps were uneven, awkward little jolts of motion. Their legs were thin, not yet strong, but they moved without help. The mother paused at the gate post, sniffed once at the air, then continued into the grass beyond the gravel. She didn't look back. If they stayed within the lower valley, food would be easy to find. If she guided them toward the thornbrush flats, they'd need shelter before dark. Both outcomes carried risk, but nothing compared to what they'd survived. Elias remained at the threshold. His hands rested at his sides, one thumb brushing the seam of his pocket. He did not speak. He did not call out. There was no need. He watched the 3 figures grow smaller with each step, their shapes folding into the light until the only thing left was the low sway of the grass. Behind him, the crate stood empty. A folded towel still held the faint outline of a small body. The bowl beside it, still half full, glinted once in the sun before the wind blew a curl of dust across its rim.